I'm a big believer in if you know the principle's right and you know you're going in the right direction, just dive in, right? Dive in with both feet, hold your nose, and swim.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Justin Harris.
It's one thing, I believe, to get to the point that you are willing and able to hire somebody. It's another thing to realize that you have got to get some things in place before you do so. Speaking of getting things in place, have you got your appraisal software in place, the one that is going to allow you to be the best at what you do? Alamode is that software, folks. Find out more at alamode.com or pick up that darn phone and call them at 800-ALAMODE. Synapse is helping you to support your adjustments. It's helping you to support your report. It's helping you to build a work file that will cause your report to be bulletproof. I hope Kyle and Brandon are okay with me using that term. I think it is. Bulletproof when you use Synapse. Check them out. Go to spark4appraisers.com and click on the Synapse button. Finally, we're sponsored today by Working RE Magazine. Working RE, helping you to stay in the know, helping you to understand what in the world is going on with the appraisal industry. Find out more by going to workingre.com. Again, it's workingre.com. All right, folks. So here's the thing. You got to do everything in its time, but one of the fears that I have in doing this episode today is that I'm going to give more ammunition to individuals who are kind of the mindset that perfection is the enemy of done. You ever heard this, right? Perfection is the enemy of done. The phrase means that you know you should move forward, you kind of have an idea of how you should move forward, but you're not going to do it until everything is perfectly in place. And guess what? Yeah, you guessed it. It never is. And as a consequence, if you're going to wait until everything is in place before you move, you're never going to move. And this is the meaning of the phrase, and there's a lot of people out that are like that. I have a tendency to be like this, that I will overanalyze things. I will roll them around. I will sleep on them. I will put them on the back burner for a while. I'll revisit them. I'm an external processor, so I'll speak to 100 people. Hey, what do you think of this idea? Hey, what do you think of that idea? I will kind of internalize all of their opinions about the matter and everything that they have. By the way, that's why I love masterminds. That's what it's all about, right? Is getting together with other like-minded people and starting to just mull ideas around and try ideas and help hold each other accountable. But I digress. The point is you can have a tendency to never do anything because you want to get everything done properly, but there is still something very strong to be said about making sure that your structure is in place. But I want to distinguish, right? That doesn't mean everything's perfect. That does not mean that you're ready 100% to bring somebody on board, but there's certain things that you just got to have on board. And I'm talking about technology today. I'm talking about getting ready structurally to bring people to the table if you have a desire to do that, whether that be a virtual assistant overseas, whether that be, your mother-in-law who might live in another town, whether that might be Shauna who, used to work for you and had a baby and wants to come back. Whatever the case may be, we live in a world that is very different than the world that we lived in several years ago. Several years ago, it was very common to have a brick and mortar building where everybody came together. And frankly, other than initially setting up the computer, it was not that big of a deal, right? You network everything together so that you can all work off of the same program and everything seems to work great. Well, those of us who have gone home and those who have not hired over the last little while will now get into this world and say, well, okay, hold on a second. If I don't have a physical building, if I don't have a room, if you will, an office where everybody can meet and then we can get together and hash out the work, what do I need? And specifically, let's talk about structure when it comes to technology and appraisal software. Okay. Now, every appraisal software works a little bit different, but they all have similarities. Let's talk Alamode for just a moment. Now, I'm not going to claim to be a tech guy. I will also tell you that some of the things I'm about to say, Alamode probably does not support on the tech side. Sorry, guys. But it's some things to think about when it comes to hiring people and bringing them on board and making sure that your office is going to be efficient and run properly. a la mode was set up for, kind of that brick and mortar building, if you will. It's set up in such a way, and I'm not, by the way, talking about Titan Reports, which is supposed to be more cloud-based. I'm talking about the original, version of Total that you might be using at your desktop at home. How in the world do you do that and structure that in such a way that you can bring somebody else on board? They can have access to your files. They can have access to your quick list. They can have access to, all of these things that you need to have access to in order to perform your work efficiently and properly. Well, I don't have the perfect answer for that, but there's a couple things that I do want to share with you that you need to be aware of. Now, by the way, the bigger answer to all of this is a free, yes, it's free, Free, webinar that I have on my website. If you'll go to theappraisercoach.com/products and you simply scroll down, it's not very far, you're going to scroll down and you are going to find a webinar. Before I tell you the name of the webinar so that you don't forget it, I'm just going to tell you briefly what it is. This is a conversation with my IT guy. It's a conversation talking about how do you set up a network in such a way that you can be productive, right? You can do the things that you need to do without breaking the bank, okay? So if you scroll about 25% down the page, you will see in the middle, kind of the right side, under the affiliated products for purchase, yes, it says purchase. It is free. Trust me, it is. Setting up an appraisal server is the name of it. Setting up an appraisal server. And it basically goes through this process. By the way, there's some prices in there as well. You do not have to pay the prices to watch the webinar, okay? The prices are if you wanted my IT guy to help you set up your own, okay? And I'm not promoting that. He's busy as all get out, so probably not even available. I'm just telling you that the resource is there just because I don't have time on this microphone today, nor will I take time to go through all the ins and outs, but that's a great resource as a starting point to kind of find out what the options are. Okay, so let me boil them down on basically three levels. Okay, there's three basic levels that I want to talk about. The first level we've probably already touched on enough, and that is just an explanation that Total is set up to kind of work in the same building. When I say Total, I mean multiple versions of Total. So if you've got Total, and by the way, this same principles, I'm just using Total as an example. You've got to think through this for every software that you use out there, okay? Whether it be ANow software, whether you're using Spark and Synapse, your MLS access, your client list, your county list, all of this stuff, you have to figure this out. In other words, go through an appraisal or two or three and ask yourself, if I were in another country, how would I do what I'm doing right now? Okay. And if you can start to get the answers to those questions, you're going to be well on your road to being able to prepare yourself and prepare your office for somebody that you might bring on board. Okay. So let's talk through that just a little bit. And what does that mean? Well, again, let's just use the analogy of Total, their sponsor here, a la mode. So it was set up basically, and I think I'm okay with saying this, Joel. Correct me if I'm wrong. Please comment below if I'm incorrect. But Total was set up for an office, and you've got your server version, and then you've got the workstations. And the workstations are physical workstations that are connected to that server. So you've got the main program running off of your server, if you will. When I say server, I'm not talking about racks. I'm not talking about fancy stuff. I'm not talking about these big rooms that you have to have a white suit to walk into. I'm talking about a computer, right? It may be the computer that you use at your desk for your Total work, right? But that's where the main program, the main software installation takes place for Total. And then you have workstations, and the workstations are either on Wi-Fi or they're hardwired in, but they're in the same room. They're in the same building, if you will, and they will reach out to your server. Your server has to be on for their Total to work, which basically means they've got a shell. We call it the workstation version of Total. They've got a shell on their computer that will reach out and grab data, including the program itself, files, quick lists, photos, comps database, all of that stuff, right? And that all of that is shared throughout the company. Okay, think of it this way. Many of you have had this experience where you tried to open up a Total report and it gave you an error and said somebody else has this open. Either override them or have them close it. Okay. The reason for that is Total will recognize, oh, this file was never closed properly, and Joan, in the other office at the end of the hall might have this thing open. So you better check with Joan so you don't override whatever she's been working on for the last 30 minutes on that report. Well, that's fine and that's good and that works when it comes to your physical setup. But again, the question on the board today is, how do you get prepared to bring somebody on board who may not be in your office, who may actually be in the Philippines, halfway across the world? I'm going to answer that question when we come back from the break. But again, want to remind you of the three great companies that we have as sponsors here on the Appraiser Coach podcast. One of them, of course, being Working RE Magazine. I love getting the emails from Working RE, right? I'll be honest with you, I don't go to their website very often. I don't. It's not something I just every morning jump out of bed and go, gee, I need to check Working RE magazine. But what I do love is the fact that they send me an email when they have a great article to read. It comes right to my email. I can choose to read it or not. Most of the time I do. Sometimes I go, it doesn't really interest me, or I read something similar, recently. I don't really want to take the time or effort to read it. I would say 8 out of 10 times I will open it up and at least skim it, but if not, read it in depth. Had that experience this morning. You should have those experiences as well because it's free, folks. FREE. WorkingRE.com is where you find out more. WorkingRE.com. Total is what we've been talking about today, a la mode. It is my software of choice. I've chosen it for many, many years. I've loved the advances over the years. Are there bugs? Sure. It's software, right? Things happen, but they will have and do have the best customer service in the industry. That's why they're number one, folks. Check them out. Go to alamode.com, or you can pick up the phone and call them, of course, at 800-ALAMODE. And we are sponsored by a new sponsor here. I love Brandon and Kyle Risch, both of them great people. If you've not listened to my episode with Brandon, my interview with him, I implore you to go back and listen to that. What great people. I get an opportunity to interact with them on a pretty frequent basis, being at the same company with them, and I can tell you that they have nothing but the best in mind for appraisers. It's a really cool software. Synapse is their newest software, will help you to support whatever you're doing in your report. Folks, think about that. Think about turning in a report and knowing if anybody comes back and says, hey, where did you get that adjustment? You actually have an answer for that. That's what Synapse will do for you. You can find out more by going to the website. It's Spark for Appraisers. That's FOR, Spark for Appraisers, and then clicking on the Learn More About Synapse button. Welcome back to the program, each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. Really great to be with you. We're talking today about setup, okay? And I wanted to make it really clear, if I didn't already in the beginning, that, I'm a big believer in if you know the principles right and you know you're going in the right direction, just dive in, right? Dive in with both feet, hold your nose, and swim, okay? I see too many appraisers who know it's a good idea, for example, to get a VA. And consequently, they are on board. They're psychologically psyched up. They, even have gone through the process of thinking through what that VA can do for them. But then they say, well, I've got to get the structure ready. I've got to get all of this in place before I can actually pull the trigger. And you guessed it, they never pull the trigger because, again, perfection is the enemy of done. I don't want this to be one of those episodes. And I realize that I'm taking a chance here doing this episode that maybe we're going down that road. But please don't go down that road. Please, when I say to you, pull the trigger. Okay, pull the trigger. However, there are some certain things that you do need to get in place, and they don't have to be heavy. They don't have to be difficult. They don't have to be challenging. But one of those things is access. Okay, whether it be access to your software, whether it be access to your, your subscriptions, meaning your county and MLS and all of these things that you need to have access to, you need to make sure that those things are set up properly. Before the break, I told you that, one thing about a la mode, we're using that as an example today, is it was kind of set up for an office that runs on its own. That's a brick and mortar that people drive to and go to work to, if you will, and share an office space with. And it works really well for that. They, of course, have Titan reports, and there's some other, amazing cloud-based things that are going on over there at CoreLogic. But the actual program that you're used to using, the total program, there is a way to use it remotely. Now, again, I think Joel and the others there at CoreLogic would say that, shut up, Dustin. We don't support this. Okay, I get it. But I have a duty, of course, to share with you all what I know. There's a couple things to think about, okay? As you get into this, first of all, we explained that there was a server and then workstations physically in the same room. You can actually do the same thing with hardware in your office and then have others remote into that. So what it looks like is this. You still physically have the same hardware. It's just that you don't physically have the same people in the office. So you might have a computer, and we're going to call that the server, even though, again, it's not, the rack type servers. It's a computer. It's a speedy, high processing computer that sits on your desktop or maybe even a laptop that you've got the main a la mode attached to, right? And then with each of the nodes, the workstations, if you will, they attach to those as well. Okay, and you've got a server version and that kind of thing that you can utilize. And then you can have your VAs or whoever else you might have working for you log in remotely to each of those workstations. That works as well, though not as well, of course, as being physically in the office. The other thing that you can do, of course, is send your files back and forth, and that will just simply require that you set up some type of a desktop on the physical computer of whoever you've hired, even if they're in the Philippines, right? They can download Total, they can install it on their computer, and you're going to pay for that, right? There's a cost involved. It's not expensive. A couple $300, $400 a year, and you've got a desk, if you will. You've bought a version that they can use for their own. One of the drawbacks, of course, to doing that is the sharing of the files. How do you work on 123 Any Street and then have Janice, your VA, work on 123 Any Street on her end? It can be a bit of a challenge, right? And so keep that in mind. There's a way to do it. You can do it through Dropbox. You can do it through email. You can do it through Google Drive. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But the point is to set up the structure in such a way that it will work for you. Of course, the other thing to do is to go to a full-fledged server. That's what we've done in our office. And that means, virtual desktops that are included and housed in big old tower computers, if you will, that sit with a high-speed internet. And we've got our pros and cons of doing that as well. Okay. And again, the point of today's episode, if you think I'm skipping over a lot of details, I'm doing so on purpose, right? I don't want this to run 3 hours, but I will tell you that, again, if you go to my website, go to products for free, even though there's a price on there, don't get confused. For free, you can go to the Setting Up an Appraisal Server webinar, and I go through this with my IT guy. It was a couple years ago that we did this. Nothing really has changed. I recently had somebody watch that and gave me some feedback, and she said, Dustin, it's pretty much the same today as it was when you recorded it. So really nothing changed as far as that goes. But here's the point, okay? If you are going to hire, and I highly recommend that you do, please take the time to set up the process and the structure in such a way that you're going to find the best case of success, the best chance of success. Thank you for joining me today, folks, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.